Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Every once in a while, leaders need to remember the joy of leadership, and leaders who are following in the footsteps of Christ have a special obligation to witness to the joy that comes from their service, because we do what we do in service of the King of Kings. While challenging sometimes, staying joyful is also a secret of the saints. Not only are leaders keepers of visions and motivators in hard times, but we also have the privilege of inspiring those who follow us. Hey everybody, I'm so glad that we have this chance to go another step deeper in our leadership. And so I want to talk with you here about the secret to joyful leadership, number 5, and the 5th secret. Now, if you remember the way that we've been framing this, we've been kind of following the map of human action that St. Thomas Aquinas lays out for us, and that I've developed at the St. John Institute with what we call the Audeo approach to leadership. And what it basically means is that we look at the sphere of human action as the framework for leadership. And human actions will follow through 5 different stages, 5 different steps, if you will, but stage is the better word for it. And each of those stages has its own proper principles and its own domain. But by breaking it up into 5 baskets, if you were able to pinpoint not only the problems, but also the opportunities. And so I'm looking in this particular class with you at the opportunities, right? So I'm trying to look with you now about what joyful leadership looks like. What are the secrets to joyful leadership? And we saw in the first phase that of the idea behind the action, the motivation. We said, gosh, the joyful leader gets to cast a big vision. We get to keep that vision alive. We're the ones that are looking ahead. And so to constantly remember that and to be able to take the time that you need to rekindle the dream and to keep that alive. And then there's the second phase of leadership, which is understanding. And in the understanding phase, the joy of the leader is to be able to bring people together into a plan, to harmonize the diversity of viewpoints, to have these great brainstorming sessions that allow people to collaborate with you, but that where you get to bring the multiplicity of the possibilities in front of you to a point, a beautiful point, a point you can rejoice in. And of course, that allows us then to be those who start. And that's the third phase of leadership, the phase of driving forward, which involves both starting and finishing. And both of these phases, we also outlined, have their own unique joys. Now, I want to speak to you today about the 5th phase of leadership, which is that of engaging others. And for Aquinas, this 5th phase is, he refers to it with the Latin word fruitio, which means to enjoy something deeply. That is, for Aquinas, at the end of a human action, after we've done what we needed to do, there's a period of enjoyment. And I think it's so profound to think about that. Like, why would Thomas Aquinas put this out there? But he says, when he explains the word fruitio, which comes from the Latin word for fruit, literally, he says it's an enjoyment akin to one eating a piece of fruit. And I think this is just so fascinating that he would put that in there. What an honest assessment. But is there any better way to put it? I mean, if you take a juicy, warm peach, right, and you bite into a juicy, warm peach, oh my goodness, the way that feels, Aquinas is like, that's the way it should feel when you finish an action. We've longed for a goal, we've wanted it to happen, and then when we finally reach the end of our action, we enjoy union with that end. Now, Aquinas is talking here about ethical activity, right? There's a little bit of a different, thing when it comes to the artistic activity that we're involved in work. And yet, both of them can kind of come together in this understanding that there is a finish that we arrive at. And that finishing state is one of enjoyment. All right, fruitio, a resting in the end that we have obtained. Now, what makes this particularly challenging for you guys is that people who are engaged in business, they rarely take a time to really enjoy that end goal. Most of the time, we finish our task and we go right on to the next one. There's almost like an endless mountain of emails to respond to. One time, I remember, I actually zeroed out my emails. I had a week full of boring meetings to attend, and I spent the time responding to the 700 emails that were in my in my inbox, and I got all the way to the bottom, and that's only happened one time in my life, but I did take a picture of the screen when I finally got and it said, you have 0 emails in your inbox. But how many of us have the same way? The work just goes in one step to the next, and it's important that we stop for a second and say, wait a second, who is going to follow us into a life like that? Either they're crazy or they're not leaders, right? Because what I mean by that is workers aren't necessarily leaders. You can be a leader as a worker, but to be a leader as a worker, you need to see an end goal, strive for it, and then after you've attained that end goal, you have to rest in it. I mean, otherwise, what's the point of getting to it? If our end goal is only the proximate goal to the next end goal, well, then we never really achieve anything. And who wants to follow somebody who's not achieving anything? You end up saying, okay, my boss who's directing me to do all this work is directing it just in a pointless exercise where I go into work every day simply to grind for no other purpose than the exercise itself. Because all we do is we do one thing, then the next, then the next, then the next, and we don't even enjoy the spot and the status that we finally have. This is a real problem. A leader has promised their people that they are going to take a mountain, and when we've taken that mountain, the leader needs to stop and rejoice in that success. Stop and enjoy that moment, even if it's briefly, and yet the enjoyment is key. Because at that point, you need to bring to a successful close what you have undertaken. It's profoundly human, and it's a secret to human joy. To enjoy the good things that you've achieved. When you think about it, it's amazing. You started with nothing. You started without having what you currently are striving for, right? Then you said, we're going to sacrifice time and energy and egos and all kinds of things that are very precious to us in order to have something even better than what we have right now. And then when you finally get to that state, which is better, well, if you don't stop and enjoy it, I mean, really, you lose motivation for yourself and for those who are following you. Everybody starts to feel like the point is just to stay busy and that somebody else is making the profit off of it, right? And this, of course, is very, deleterious to our human condition. No one wants to work for the sake of working, except people like you, who, of course, no, I'm just joking, but people who are addicts of work, right? And that's not what we're all about. A Christian is not called to be a slave to work. A Christian is a servant of Christ who then uses work to glorify Christ. But then there should be an end goal in that work where we literally glorify Christ. And how do you glorify Christ? By giving him thanks for what you've achieved and for what he's given you. I mean, this is why we say grace before meals. It's because that word grace before meals, it comes from the Latin gratias, which literally means both something that is given and the act of giving thanks for what is given. And so we say grace for our graces. Okay, but what that means is that thanksgiving, which of course is also the root of the Eucharist, the root word for Eucharist, it's the Greek word Eucharist means thanksgiving, right? So we have to stop at a certain point and say, thank you, God. Thank you for what we've achieved. And there's no better way to thank someone for a gift that they've given than for you to enjoy that gift. If you've climbed to the top of the mountain, take 5 minutes
you like to
and
hear
look
more from Father
around from the
Nathan?
peak.
Join the St. John
It's
Leadership
what-
Network
it's
and
what
receive
we
a
do,
2-minute
and
glance
it's
at the
part of the
gospel
secret
every
of a
Sunday
joyful
morning right to
leader,
your phone.
and it's what's
To
going to
learn
make
more,
people
go to
joyful followers of a joyful leader.
www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So in the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas, who's a medieval thinker in the Catholic tradition, the finished product, what you do at the end of an action, is you enjoy the action, fruitio. You literally, as he says, it's like eating a piece of fruit. You simply enjoy the rich taste of the fruit at the end of the action. You rest, he says, in union with the one whom you have loved. Okay, so that's in an ethical activity. Then in artistic activity, he is, following the line of Aristotle, there's a type of artistic rest of contemplation where you turn around and you say, this is good. I remember when I used to be a roofer, I was a union roofer for several years. And when I was a roofer, we used to rip off sections of roof. And of course, you'd only tear off the amount that you could cover in that day, because the weather could roll in. You could have rains, and if you don't have a roof, you're going to have a lot of problems underneath. So we'd always be looking at the weather, tear off a section of roof, and then at the end of the day, we would cover that same section. And I remember the pride in the team as we would, we finished the day, and you'd look back at that piece of brand new, beautiful roof that you laid down, and you think to yourself, that's going to last for 30 years. We guaranteeing that work for 30 years. And we were able to see the progress that we made. That's the artistic contemplation. It comes at the end of our activities where you stop and you say, it is good. What we have done is good. And if it is indeed good, your mind rests and you come to a certain closure. Well, of course, that's a beautiful parallel with fruitio, or resting in love in the end with the one whom you have loved, right? So in both of those, you have this same concept that the end of our activity needs to be reached. And I've been telling you, you can't just keep going from one thing to the next. This is very demotivating for people that are around you. And also, it doesn't allow you the chance to explain and to inspire in people who are going to have to one day succeed you. It's something that a lot of great workers, especially entrepreneurs, overlook. And that is the importance of raising up people underneath you who can do what you're doing, so that they can then do what you're doing even better and carry it forth when you no longer can. And of course, I'm thinking of any number of senior executives who, coming into their mid-60s, early 70s, turn to me and they say, Father Nathan, I know so much. I wish I could pour this back into the next generation. I wish I had someone that I could mentor. Do you have anyone that I could mentor to tell all of the wisdom that I have? And it's very touching, right? Like, they don't really say it like that, but that's what they're saying anyway. And of course, I'm thinking of any number of young people that I then try to connect with them through the St. John Institute, right? So that they can get that mentorship and have the role of that person in their life. But it's profound when I'm listening to their hearts, because the desire then is no longer just to keep doing things. The desire is to pass on the flame, to light a fire in the hearts of other people, to help the next generation through this incredibly joyful, even if it's trying, right, occupation called for business leadership. I mean, it's on the one hand, when we're in it, all of us are tested to the max. But when you've succeeded and you've gone through, the paces, well, there's kind of like a desire like that you see in soldiers when they want to tell stories of their battles. Well, there's kind of or coaches when they talk about their greatest victories. There's something akin in the heart of a business leader who wants to turn around and say, hey, this is how I did it. And I want to zero in on that joy, because that's an example of fruitio. That's an example of resting in the end. That's a great example, because when you look at the span of a career, it's full of so many things. You want to look back over it, but then express how you got through. And of course, this could just be done in a narcissistic, selfish kind of way, but that's really not what I'm talking about, because it can also be done in a way where what you're really doing is lighting a fire in someone else. You're passing on what's inside of you in so that it can be inside of them. Right? If it's from the outside, in other words, and you're talking about skill sets and market conditions and teamwork and these things that are kind of boring, well, you can glorify yourself, and that doesn't do much for a follower of Christ. But if you could pass on to someone the ways that Jesus and your faith were important to you at the darkest and most trying of moments, or the ways that you were inspired to suddenly do something different when everyone thought that this was the way forward and you found a whole new path which ended up being the way to success. I mean, there's so many stories that we can speak of, not just on the outside of what happened, but on the inside, why it happened that way. And that is so valuable because it's a passing on of wisdom. And in a way, it's a passing on of faith. It's passing on to the next generation for people that are around you, those who are following you, the reason why you made it. And if we look in the Bible, we see the same thing happening. Look, for example, in Deuteronomy 31:14. Okay, go ahead and open your Bibles there. I know you got them. Deuteronomy, it's towards the beginning of the Bible there, 31:14. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, the days approach when you must die." All right, well, that's, of course, kind of sobering. The days are approaching when you must die, right? First of all, are we aware of that in our own lives, in our own leaderships? We think sometimes that it's just going to go on and on forever, but of course it's not. There's going to be the day will approach when we must retire. Okay, so he says, "Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tent of meeting that I may commission him." And then Moses does what he's told, and the Lord commissions Joshua. But then Moses turns and he sings this beautiful song. This is in Deuteronomy 32. You can see the whole thing right there, the Song of Moses, in which he reminds the people about what God has done. What a moment of joy for Moses to go through the whole history of the Exodus for the people of God and then tell them all of these beautiful times that God was there. What is he really doing? He's teaching Joshua to not be afraid. That as Joshua continues the journey, just as God was there in the past, so God will be there in the future. What Moses is really saying is that the reason for our success here is that God was with me. And as God has been with me, so God will be with you. What does that do? That lights a fire. It's passing on the flame. The flame of leadership that was burning in the heart of Moses gets passed on at that moment. And then in Deuteronomy 33, he turns around and blesses each of them. There's closure, you see, that happens. But that closure is a leadership moment. Closures are one of the most important moments in our leadership is when we have achieved something. And I think you can do this on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. Turn around and enjoy the moment with everybody. Look what we did. We started off there and we finished here. Now, of course, some people then go out to dinners. You can do appreciation. You can do all kinds of different things. But in one way or the other, remember that leadership moment. Because that's when everybody is looking to you to see why we made it. What's the bigger purpose? What was happening inside? And you get to embody for that team that spirit. What a moment of joy. Because that's where your work becomes human. And you're not just doing it for profit. You're not just doing it for company growth. You're doing it because it's a glory of a human person to labor for something.
Would you like to start your
that
Thursday
drive,
mornings
that
with
inner
a scriptural
fire,
leadership lesson?
you get to share.
Join the St.
by
John Leadership
pointing out
Network,
to everyone
where Father
the
Nathan hosts
reason
a 30-minute
behind
call
the
at
victory.
6:30
And of course, this is found in
a.m.
other
all 4
moments
US
in the
time
Bible
zones.
as well.
To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
I think at the heart of a leader's joy is our ability to pass on what's in our heart to the hearts of those who are behind us. And it's not for everybody, and it's not all the time. And, you have to accept the realism of this. But that certain people just aren't open to that, and certain situations are not appropriate. But there's a role for this that I just want to make sure that we study together and understand. Because it's a profoundly human thing to want to communicate not just how a thing was done on the outside, but why it was done. And I use that word on purpose, communication, because that really says exactly what this really is. How do I bring you into communion with me, right? How do I communicate, pass on, make you share with the Spirit that has brought us both to this final moment of joy, right? This is where we become human, where we share our humanity. We have dreamed together. We have fought through things together. And now at the end, we need to be able to rejoice together, celebrate together, even if it's briefly, even if it's only just with a few words of affirmation. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of the custom that people have when they play golf. Polite golf manners is that at the end of a round of golf, you stop and everybody shakes hands. It's kind of an odd thing. You might not have spoken much during the round, but then at the end, everybody shakes hands, right? But even if you've had a bad round, it's just what's polite to do because you're bringing the thing to a close in a good way, right? This is what communication does. In communication, it's where we get to go deep in our leadership. Just like in our visioning and our dreaming, we get to go high, right? And then in our drive, we get to go through whatever's in front of us. In our communication, we get to go deep. So, I mean, at its heart, what this communication is, you see, it's something where I get to bring into the outside or the circumstances of the work, of what we got to do today, what we did yesterday, what we're going to be doing in the future. I get to bring also the ethos, right? The inner conditions of my heart to bear. Now, obviously, this is not always appropriate. You can only do it a little bit because otherwise you become very heavy, right? No one really wants to have to accept the ethos, right? To use a gentle word, the other word is pathos, right? Because some people, when they try to communicate their ethos, end up communicating their pathos, right? So the ethos is the spirit, the positive energy that's been with you as you've done this thing. This is an important thing to communicate. Pathos is the painful energy, the heartaches, the trials, right? And most of the time, people don't really want to listen to that. I mean, it renders us sympathetic to somebody who's sharing the pathos that has driven them. But in the end, suffering is something you can't share. It's a very personal thing. The ethos, though, you can share because that's something that everyone can ascribe to in their own way. And this is what's so important, to make sure that when you're communicating joy. My goodness. Everyone wants to listen to a preacher who's smiling at them, right? Everybody who wants to listen, because then you're showing that you believe in the people who are following you. People want to follow people who are winners and are on the winning team. And the fact that they had to suffer and go through things as they went through it is really not the point, and it's not attractive. This is the art of communicating well, is to communicate victory, because when you're communicating victory, you're communicating that person's happy future, right? And everyone wants to follow in the footsteps of someone who's going to bring them to happiness, to fulfillment. So, even if you know that the way is going to be difficult, if you're not willing to tell people that where you're going is worth the sacrifice, then you shouldn't be leading them there. But if you are leading them there and you are taking that opportunity to bring the people to some place that's better, you need to be able to tell them that. I mean, where's your own joy? Where's your own smile, right? Do you wear a smile into the workplace? Do you greet people at the beginning of a meeting with a friendly hello? Right? Or do we immediately just take our pathos into things, into the pain that we're carrying, the stress that we're under? It's just really important because followers have the unfortunate situation of having to receive everything that their leader emits because they're there, because we're paying them to follow us, to do what we need them to do. Well, if we're emitting negativity and negative energy and we're emitting that pathos forward, well, the poor follower has to sit there and absorb that all day long. And then we wonder why they don't really, fight with us on the field of battle, at our side with joy. It's because we're not even leading them with joy, right? This is where our Christian leadership really gets to begin. I mean, if we're doing what we're doing in the awareness that what we're doing out of love for God and in gratitude to the Redeemer of our souls, and as an act of love, ultimately, for, the people of God, and the world, for other people who have needs. What we're doing is important in our company because we're delivering good goods and good services to people who are in need of them. I mean, if we're making bread every day, it's to feed a hungry world. If we're picking up garbage it's to clean up a dirty world. I mean, what an amazing perspective. And that's the perspective that we get to take into our jobs every day. Well, that's a joyful perspective. So, I mean, if we're just communicating with folks the pain that's in our heart, or the sacrifice that we're going through, the difficulty, they're not going to want to follow. We're not going to be passing on the fire because we didn't get involved in things because they were difficult. We got involved in things because they were worthy. And a Christian who follows Christ into business is following Christ into business. And therefore we follow him with hope in our hearts, right? And with this desire to see his will be done and to let Christ transform the world through us. And that's a beautiful and such a great opportunity that if we allow it to shape our own minds, well, then we'll pass on a torch of true inspiration and of genuinely joyful leadership to those who are following us. So what can we do? We need to get real practical and look at our words and our behaviors with the people that are closest to us. And starting today, just make sure at least once a day you say positive things about the future. Okay, so I'm going to be real practical, real easy with you. Starting today, communicate at least to one person the joy that you have found in your success and in your opportunity to strive for it in the name of Christ. Right? By doing that, we give such good witness to Jesus, and we bring other people with us more effectively because we have become a joyful leader, and it's a secret to our success.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.